Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar discussion video. In this one I'm going to do a little bit of a kind of what if scenario and sort of use this as a way to just sort of do more of a general Asami character discussion. So we're going to answer the question, what if Asami was an Equalist? So basically what we're doing here is we're taking what I consider to be Asami's best moment in the show as it happens. Her decision in K-107, The Aftermath, to side with her friends over her father. That, I think, is Asami's best character moment. So we're going to take that and actually have her make basically the opposite decision. Now this changes a few things about her character in the sense that she goes from not being aware of what Hiroshi was doing and actually being like completely innocent and unaware to now all of a sudden her entire dynamic with Team Avatar up to that point was sort of undercover gathering information on important vendors in the city. That she was an Equalist the whole time, and it's just 107 is when the reveal comes out to her friends basically that she is an Equalist. How does that simple change Asami's sort of trajectory across the seasons? Because, and I want to make this very clear as we go through this video, fundamentally I love Korra as a series. I don't have too many major complaints with it, and I do like Asami as a character, but I do often find myself stretching for scenes that really, you know, super highlight the strength of the character. That is not just her, like, in an action scene, you know, taking out people. The reason I like the 107 scene so much is because I do feel it is one of the few scenes in the entirety of Legend of Korra where the entire attention of the scene is on Asami and the decision that she will make. And the result of that decision in the show is a huge moment. Hiroshi is the only member of her family left. She's only like just met like Mako, Bolin, Korra, and become friends with them. So it's a major decision that she is able to put sort of her own ideals and morals ahead of her loyalty to her father. The problem with Asami, though, is that there's not really many more scenes for the character that are on that level, that really come across as a big character moment, a moment of growth necessarily for the character, in that I do feel Asami's main moments from the show as it plays out are her decision in 107, the fight against Hiroshi in K-112 Endgame, and then more or less skip to book 4 and the scenes where she has the gradual reunion with her father and then the death of Hiroshi. So in the show, most of Asami's key moments are attached to basically her dynamic with her father, siding against him, and then the recovery and kind of redevelopment of that relationship. She has a little bit of an arc in book 2, but she ends up actually being one of the like least important like aspects of that arc. Even though it's it's Future Industries, it's her company that gets stolen. It is ultimately Bolin sort of basically outs Varric as being the villain, which in turn means Mako was right about Varric, and the turn of everyone against Varric solves Asami's sort of situation for her without her really playing too much of a role in her own story. So she gets Future Industries back and in, I suppose, a better position because of the interactions with like other characters more than anything. And sure, she's in or around the group for a lot of these episodes and on all these books, but there's nothing like that really highlight her character throughout a lot of the other books. And because like her personality is sort of this one that doesn't stand out too much. She doesn't have, I think, too many like extreme traits. Like Korra, of course, has the sort of fierceness, the stubbornness, the drive. Bolin, of course, is like the most lighthearted member of the team. Mako has the kind of brooding side, but also the awkward side. Asami is just sort of like this like aggressively sort of competent character in everything that she does, in that she has emotional moments, but they rarely completely destroy her. And so we've never really had too many moments where we get to really see more stuff that, you know, is the 107, the power of that moment. And I'm interested to see as we go forward in like the comics what they do with the character, because Turf Wars and Runes of the Empire both, I don't think, used Asami particularly well, because in broad terms, she had to be saved by Korra in both books. Now, obviously, different situations happened. Turf Wars, she at least had some sort of a dynamic with Wan Yong Kum, but it wasn't really much of an arc. And again, it was another thing that ultimately stemmed back to Wan Yong Kum had a connection to Asami's father, not necessarily Asami, and there needs to be this sense for her sort of breaking away from everything important about her being something that is like related to her father, and more about the individual that is Asami, because I think there's potential in the character, especially with her now being Korra's girlfriend. There's that sense where like she's never going to be in a better position right now than right now, because she is effectively the second most important member of Team Avatar at this point. Use that to develop her some more. So let's get into sort of how slightly altering that big moment would have maybe led to better things for the character overall. So the rules of this what if are basically that we're going to try and keep the show pretty much as close to as it actually plays out as possible, changing the least amount of things possible, and pretty much like not add in too many new scenes, and just play off effectively, okay, we're making this kind of one major change with Asami. How does it impact things going forward? So obviously, like I said, from the start, it turns out that, you know, Asami is doing a little bit of acting. She's acting more innocent than she actually is. She actually knows the full details about her father and is actually working with him. And the idea is that she's also an inventor. She would also have played a hand in developing a lot of items like the mecha tanks and the shock gloves and so on, the technology. So she actually is a major member of the Equalist movement, and so it means that her dating Mako is spying on Mako because of the Firefarer connection to Korra, and it gives at least some reason to have like an agent in close. That's what she's doing. This also gives you your your effective out for, we're still going to have within book one Asami ultimately side with her friends over the Equalist movement. It's just that instead of it happening in episode 7, it's more going to be in the finale of book 1. That way, again, we're roughly keeping things the same. We're just giving Asami a couple of more episodes to be like out there as the villain, so that we end the book. She's made her big choice, but she still has to deal with the idea that she was a villain. She tricked her friends. She lied to her friends. And this is going to solve, I think, quite a few things in the book. So, everything more or less can play out exactly as it is, with only, I suppose, maybe minimal changes where maybe in certain scenes it stands out that Asami is either being maybe a little bit sly, or on the other side of things, that her true feelings are beginning to come out, and she's beginning to connect with things in a way that you wouldn't expect, perhaps. The other main thing is obviously that it turns out that Hiroshi never really tried to convince Asami to dislike benders in the actual show. Here, she would have to sort of have some agreement initially with his ideals, but come to realize that they are wrong. And she doesn't mind hanging out with benders, being in a relationship with a bender, and so on. So we get to 107. Now, there are a few things you do need to change here, because the way it happens in the show, Asami is actually the thing that sort of saves everyone from the situation. Her big turn, taking out the lieutenant, is what allows everyone to kind of get out, more or less. So I think all you change here is just that everyone technically gets defeated. It's just not as many characters get, I suppose, knocked out. And Asami still makes her turn, but instead of shocking the lieutenant and joining her friends, she backs up and is there with the lieutenant and her father on that side. And it actually turns this moment into actually another big moment for Mako, because Mako is in a relationship with Asami at this point. He's been defending Hiroshi for the last few episodes alongside Asami, and now all of a sudden he has been betrayed in this moment, because he's the closest to Asami. The others are too, but Mako would feel it the most because he has that close connection. This also basically serves as effectively the breakup of Mako and Asami within the book. So it prevents you having to do any sort of the romance awkwardness of having that breakup happen to allow Mako and Korra to get together. Instead, the setup stuff for Mako and Korra can still happen, and the breakup happens purely because Asami was a villain and was lying. Her feelings towards Mako can still be sort of real, but the breakup is valid, of course, because Mako, his trust was broken. So that's one thing that you can do. There's like a major thing that Asami did that was sort of wrong and will have to redeem herself for going forward. The thing that happens in the show after 107 is obviously that Asami is sort of with the group. She's having to deal with the fact that she's not sort of the rich girl anymore and has to sort of hang out on Air Temple Island with everyone and deal with the changes. And most of the scenes with Asami are her sort of reflecting on her father and what she did and didn't know about him. And then little moments of sort of almost jealousy as she sees Mako and Korra kind of grow closer. That's the majority of like the Asami dynamic. She's part of Team Avatar, of course, and you know you get more the friendship development here, but effectively it's just annoyed at her father and slightly annoyed at what's happening with the relationship stuff as we head into basically episode 12, and then she has to fight with Hiroshi. Instead, if you do things this way, suddenly all those episodes are actually scenes where Asami is out as the villain. She can talk openly with the lieutenant, with her father, with Amon if you need to. That's an interesting dynamic you could do also. And you just have that sort of stuff come out. So, given that you've already sort of planted the seeds to a degree, because one thing I forgot to address this actually. How did they actually get out of the situation in 107? Given that Asami is the hero of that scene is actually not on the right side. Have a situation where she's okay with fighting pretty much anyone else in the room, like Lin, Tenzin, Korra, Bolin. She can't bring herself to go all out against Mako. And that gives the group an opening for at least Mako to have an opening to get to help get people out. That he can use maybe a big lightning attack here with the mega tanks or something like that to give them the advantage and just get out of there. It turns this scene into a big Asami development moment, and it gives Mako a little bit more to do as well. So I think that's a rather simple way to do it, in that you're using the dynamic that is there. Unfortunately, Mako and Asami's relationship ends up not meaning that much in book 1 as it actually happens. Here, you at least play with that to the point where it's plot relevant for more reasons than just that. But anyway, in the episodes following this, you can now have Asami interacting with those characters. And you can contrast the idea that we know that she has mixed feelings about things. Yet, all of a sudden, she's now interacting with the people who are most deeply entrenched in the Equalist movement. Her father is saying terrible things about Benders and what happened. He's like insulting Mako, Korra, Asami. And you can see that she's going along with it, so she doesn't like out herself. But the doubts are beginning to come in more and more. And that creates, I think, a very interesting dynamic for Asami, where you really play on the idea of this arc of her going from just these slight doubts, she actually has a connection with her friends, to realizing, my father is sort of a monster with the way how aggressively anti-Bender he actually is. Now, one thing that is not present in really the show itself, and you can choose to, I suppose, in this new interpretation put in wherever you want, is flashback stuff with Yasuko, Asami's mother. So obviously we know Asami's mother was killed by the Agni Kai triad, firebenders basically, and that is why effectively Hiroshi hates benders. And it would also be the reason why Asami, in this case, hates benders. In the actual show, it turns out she doesn't. But we never really get to see, like I was pointing out, it's the strength of Asami's arc is a lot of the connection stuff to Hiroshi. But in this case, we want to also emphasize, okay, she's different than Hiroshi, though. So, you know, what aspects of her actually come from her mother? Who was Yasuko? What was the true impact of that on Asami? And how it differs from the impact on Hiroshi. So just adding in some sort of a little flashback stuff with Asami would be really nice, just to get across the idea that it was more Hiroshi's grief and his anger at Benders that influenced Asami, rather than Asami having that herself from what happened to her mother. And that would be another thing to put the doubt in your mind as a viewer watching the character as she goes through what happens. But what's also interesting is that suddenly Asami is on the opposite side during a lot of key events that happen following this. So, of course, Korra has her confrontation with Tarlok in episode 8. She's sort of like kidnapped. But then, episode 9, Amon turns up next to Tarlok and takes him out. Imagine that scene, but Asami is suddenly there. And instead of sort of just a kind of Korra getting herself out of that situation, imagine Asami has to, do a little bit of spy work almost. And without alerting Amon or the lieutenant to what she's doing, she has to sort of give Korra a clue or like pass something into her to get out. Like maybe Korra doesn't think to use like her armband thing to go up. What if like Asami just like puts in a little piece of rope, slides it into Korra's cage, and Korra just about gets that it was Asami that slipped it in, and sort of suddenly there's your kind of Korra is questioning Asami's allegiances. So that would be a cool little moment to just like she can be involved in a lot of these other kind of key scenes that happen. So that's really cool. You can have her be there during the attack during the heavy action episode 10, and again maybe shows some hesitation. Maybe she faces off against Mako again, and they have a little bit of a conversation in everything that happens, and maybe someone else is the one to sort of step in to face her or something like that. And again, a lot of the stuff can still be roughly the same. More scenes with her talking to the other members of the Equalist, and the differences beginning to become clear, leading up to basically episode 12 happening in basically the same way. It ends up in a situation where Asami is with Hiroshi, Bolin on Naga is the one like attacking them on the airfields, and Hiroshi is about to take out Bolin until Asami turns. So you slightly alter that scene to give Asami this big moment. This is her 107 moment, it's just in 112. You're still fundamentally doing the mecha tank fight of Asami versus Hiroshi, but this is the moment of full she has chosen her sides after all this time. And at this point, Asami and Bolin work together to take out Hiroshi. That way, Bolin is actually the first one to see just directly Asami full on turn, whereas Mako and Korra more have like slight glimpses that she has her doubts from like Asami helping out, Mako from the fact that she can't bring herself to fight him or something like that. You could also play on maybe the idea that she's the one to leak to them, you guys should go talk to Tarlok about some important information, and that's how maybe they come across him and find out the story. So that's really cool. So you end book 1 with Asami kind of part of the group because she has fully turned. Like Bolin is more of the one vouching for her. She is still part of the group but there's different dynamics going on. Bolin fully trusts her because she saved his life. Korra and Mako have their doubts. And then you also play on the idea that just the romance stuff also creates a little bit of a distance between those two and Asami because she was previously with Mako. So going into book 2, Asami has to deal with a bunch of different things. And that is, one, the company is now hers. But it's now not just Hiroshi's bad reputation she has to deal with, but also her own. And then personally, she also has to deal with the fact that she has to sort of redeem herself in the eyes of her friends. She wants to be on better terms with Korra and Mako, and she needs to make that happen. So you can still have the Varric stuff happen, I suppose, if you want. Or you can just actually devote Asami's arc to being more of just a personal situation of her proving herself. Now, obviously, you can come with a few ideas to figure out what exact way to have her fully prove herself to everyone, but just being there for the rest of the team during all of this, I think, would be quite good. That maybe this is how you can make the Mako Asami re-get back together thing in book 2 work by Asami actually completely believing Mako, rather than him being sort of left out on his own in all these things. And so that's what earns the trust back from Mako, and she finds some way to help out Korra as well. Like, maybe just by being involved in the attacks flying the plane at the end, that's enough on their dynamic, given that you're going to do more of the Korra and Asami development in book 3, which is where it happens in the show as well. Otherwise, like in the actual show itself, Korra and Asami don't interact that much in book 1 and book 2. But still, you can do that. Another thing you can also do is utilize the Equalist, that maybe some of them are loyal to Asami, specifically in the aftermath of all of this. So Asami maybe has a group of, chi blockers under her control, and she doesn't just have company, but she also has this, the Equalists who side with her and don't agree with the full benders are bad situation. That would be quite interesting, and it would be a way to have like a sudden group come in to help during like a key scene. Like Asami's chi blockers help the south fend off the north in a scene, and that's what earns some trust with Korra. So straight away you turn the opposite decision into like an arc for book 1 and book 2. That's one way to do more with the character. And just the fact that she was a villain, and you can have scenes of her having more of that edge, that is something else to add to the character, that now we know sort of, if you push Asami too far, she can be kind of a little bit villainous like that because of what she potentially has done in certain scenes. So that's an important thing to sort of have in your back pocket. Now, going into book 3 and 4, this is where I suppose there's a lot of open ground to work with, because other than Korra and Asami being in like a lot of scenes together, Asami doesn't really have much of a plot as such in book 3, like a character arc. It's more of just her being there with the group, helping out where she can, and that's about it. So that's fine. Obviously, if you were to redo Korra, you would probably want more clear and obvious, more direct Korra Asami setup scenes. So that's one thing you can do, and to make things more worthwhile, and just utilize those type of dynamics. So that's all good. Other than that, like, I'm relatively okay with the idea that maybe you have a book for Asami where like there's one book where she doesn't have too much going on. The way it ends up playing out is that like across the 4 books, it's like 2 books where she doesn't really have much to do, and in the grand scheme of things, one of those books she also doesn't have too much to do either. So the only other thing then is like effectively like you can have book 3 and 4 more or less play out exactly as you need to. The only one I would add in, and I think this is something they can do in the comics if they want to, they can actually do this plot with either you can actually do, I suppose, either Mako and Bolin or Asami, or actually both if you make the right connection. And that is the fact that Mako and Bolin's parents, as well as Asami's mother, were both killed by firebenders. Now, they've never made the connection that it was the same person, but you theoretically could if you wanted to. And an option with that is to kind of have a Southern Raiders-esque episode for Asami, Mako, or Bolin. Now, I've gone back and forth about like which is maybe better, because it is an option for all the characters. I actually feel it might actually work better for Asami, because here is a very personal thing. If one of the things you feel you have to do with Asami is utilize Hiroshi a lot to kind of help her character, why not use her mother in the same way to do more? If you do what I was saying earlier on and have some sort of a book 1 Yasuko flashback, here's your opportunity at some point to do the full story, like hunt the killer of Yasuko. And Asami, just normally, this would be something that would set her on edge. We maybe get to see a little bit of the 107 dynamic with her anyway. But in the what if scenario, her villainous edge might actually come out, and she might be out to kill. Again, it depends on how you characterize her as a villain. But still, you have this idea that the characters are aware that she can go far if she wants to. And her emotions surrounding this might be very, very intense. And in the same way that Katara ultimately had sort of, in a way, Zuko trying to help her, but maybe leaning more towards like facilitating her killing someone, and then Aang on the other side asking for forgiveness to think this through. This is not what you want to do. You could have, for Asami, Korra and Mako sort of be the two characters to kind of guide her through this. And you can do a slightly different dynamic. Instead of maybe with Aang and Zuko kind of being extremes in a way for Katara, instead you have more nuanced opinions from Korra and Mako. Because Mako will be understanding of this to a certain degree, because he basically has a similar issue himself with what happened to his parents, and what would he do if he knew the killer was out there. But he's a police officer now, so would he advocate for Asami going after them, or would he let his want for the law to happen, justice to happen, take place? And that would be a conflicting position that maybe Mako would settle on. I think you need to let this go, or you can help us out, but we are taking him into custody if we capture him. Korra could actually have the perspective of just, she hunts down the bad guys. That's typically her response to things. She wants to go in and take people out. She wants to support, I suppose if you're doing this maybe in book 3, her friend, or if you're setting it after book 4 and maybe potential for in canon comic, her girlfriend, she might actually be more supportive of, if this is what you need, I'll support you up to a certain degree. I agree that like he needs to be hunted down, but again, do you want to like kill him? Is the question. And just that idea that the two of them will have a little bit more nuanced takes on the situation rather than quite far apart opinions, and that would be something quite interesting to do, because it would be a non-bender fighting a firebender character. And so you could do the whole, instead of, Katara overpowering Yonra with the power of a bending, you get the reverse of that situation of like, you used your power to kill my like non-bender mother. I'm more powerful than you now. And you do some sort of a thing where she lets, like, say, Mako and Korra take the guy into custody. And you have that be a strong moment for the character where she's able to like let go of her kind of issues surrounding that, or it depends. We're not writing the exact scenes here, but you can do that if you want to. You can also do the reverse situation where maybe for Mako and Bolin, it's Asami and Korra giving perspectives on this, and maybe Asami to the brothers would have slightly different advice to Korra, given that she experienced this. And that's something I just want to know, is just Asami, when she is sort of like challenged in that way, what choice would she actually make? Because in 107, in the canon scene, she obviously makes the choice to go with basically what's right, what she deems as being right, over her loyalty to her father. And it makes for like a really strong moment for the character, but it's like one of the only instances that we get that kind of style of Asami sort of coming out. So, there's options here, and I want Asami character focus in an upcoming Korra story. I also want some Mako focus in an upcoming story as well. I definitely think of the main 4 Team Avatar members, Korra and Bolin are probably the most developed. Korra probably doesn't really need much development for a while. And I think Asami is the one who does need some attention. Quite a lot. Because her relationship with Korra kind of really highlights that you have sort of the most underdeveloped member of Team Avatar together with the most developed one. So it does feel like we know everything about Korra. Every decision, we know every aspect of her personality. Whereas Asami still feels a little kind of mysterious in a way, that like they don't overly present what her personality is a lot in scenes, because she's never been the focus of that many scenes before. And so that's why 107 stands out, because she finally is all eyes on her making a big decision. And I want to see more of that going forward. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on just Asami as a character, and what more they can do with her in, like, say, future comics or content to help develop her more, show off her character a bit better. But then also the sort of gimmick of this video, in a way, the what if scenario. How do you think things would have went if actually Asami was an Equalist lieutenant alongside the lieutenant for, like, all of book 1, and the turn only happens at the end? How do you think that would have changed her character? Would it be really helpful, or are you ultimately, roughly like myself, relatively happy with the way things went, and this is just a sort of purely what if, things could have been interesting? The other thing I forgot to mention at the start is just that part of the reason I'm doing this one as well is because I believe in the initial concept stuff, the plan initially was that Asami would be a villain, and they changed it to her making the choice to be on the right side at a certain point. I think it was relatively early in production, so we didn't get too far into that, but the potential was definitely there. It was, the creators were thinking about it, so it's not just like an out of the blue what if thing. So in the comments, let me know, but that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.